Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Secret of Shadow Ranch. Chapter 9, Tack Room Prisoner. Keeping a firm grip on the reins, Nancy stuck tight to the middle. In a few moments, her mount steadied himself and began to swim toward Bess's horse. When they drew close, Nancy seized Choo Choo's reins. While the frightened girl clung to her saddle, her horse was towed to the shore. "Oh, Nancy," she exclaimed, "you were wonderful. You saved us." Nancy still looked worried. "We can't stay here," she said. "We're not out of trouble yet. I'm afraid the trail down is to be slippery and wet." George grimaced. "What's the hurry? We can't get any wetter than we are." The girls looked at one another. Despite this situation, they could not repress giggles. All were drenched and mud splattered, with water streaming from their hair. "You're lucky Bud isn't here to see you," George teased Bess as Nancy led the way down the trail. Bess shivered and made a face at her cousin. "I know I must be a sight," she said. "I can tell by looking at the rest of you." George's joke had served to relieve the tension, and now the girls applied themselves to guiding their horses down the precarious trail. As they reached the bottom, the rain stopped and the sun emerged hot and bright. From there on, the trip was easier. By the time they reached the big meadow, their clothes were almost dry. Chief raced ahead to the stable, barking madly. Bess groaned. "Oh, he's making so much noise, he'll bring out a reception committee, and everybody will see us." "What?" Nancy smiled at the remark and then warned the others to say nothing about the man in the black gallant hat to everyone except the Raleighs. When the girls rode up in the corral, Dave and Tex and Bud were waiting for them. "Where did you find the chief?" asked Dave. He surveyed their bedraggled condition but made no comment. Tex said, "Looks like you girls got caught in a little mountain sprinkle." Bud grinned and said, "There was nothing. Wait till you all get caught in a real Western-style rain." "No thanks," Bess retorted. "We'll tell you about the dog later," Nancy promised. The girls hastily dismounted and fled to the house. After hot showers, they dressed for supper. Nancy wore a powdered blue sweater and skirt and brushed her tightened hair until it gleamed. George wore a smart dark green linen dress. She was ready long before Bess, who wore a yellow sweater and skirt and changed her hairdo 3 times. "I want to look extra nice," Bess said, "to make up for the extra awful way I looked this afternoon." Before supper, the girls sat down to the living room with the Raleighs and told them of their afternoon's adventures. Nancy passed lightly over the stream crossing incident, but Bess refused to let the matter drop. When everyone had gathered around the table, she bragged of Nancy's bravery. Nancy, always embarrassed by praise, changed the subject as soon as possible. When the meal was over, Dave called Nancy over aside on the portico. "I owe you an apology," he said soberly. "There was a mighty fine thing you did this afternoon. I see now that you're not the tenderfoot nuisance I thought you were going to be." Nancy smiled. "This is the first time it's arrived since you've been friendly. Are you always so gruff to newcomers?" He flushed. "No, but He hesitated. "Well, I had a special reason." Before Nancy could ask him what it was, he said, "I have to go now. We'll talk later." Dave swung off the portico and headed toward the corral. Nancy watched him disappear into the dust, puzzled by his remarks. Was he guilty of something or not? She was aware that Ed Raleigh trusted him. On the other hand, she had no proof that Dave had been telling the truth about the mud on his shoes. She reminded herself that he knew about Francis Homer's watch and therefore had a reason to trick the girls out of their room and later take the old green bottle. Did Dave apologize in order to allay my suspicions of him? She wondered. As Nancy started toward their living room, she met the other girls and Bet coming out. "We're going to a drive-in movie," said Alice. "Want to come along?" "I'd love to," Nancy replied, "but I think I'd better stay at home and keep watch." Bess and George offered to remain with her, but Nancy urged them to go on. As Mrs. Raleigh and the other girls walked around the ranch wagon, Nancy hurried to her bedroom. She changed into riding clothes, picked up a flashlight, and then headed to the table. She decided to saddle her mount and be ready to ride in case the phantom horse should appear. The young sleuth was determined to catch the ghost horse or examine his tracks whether they were obscured by other pursuers. As Nancy reached the stable, Dave came out leading a horse where he mounted once. He carried a flashlight. "Just checking up," he said. "Snooping again?" "Yes," Nancy replied. Quickly, she changed the subject by asking if everyone kept in the big meadow at night for the phantom. "No," was the reply. "Shorty and I have the first patrol, while Tex keeps watch on the windmill and Bud stands ground on East Meadow. When it's our turn to ride patrol, Shorty and I will switch jobs with them." He added, "The foreman is riding the fence in the East Meadow. We have to do it right now. That way the cattle will be guarded 24 hours a day." Dave rode off and Nancy went through the stable into the tack room, a long frame building attached to it. She turned on her flashlight and saw rows of saddles hanging from the walls and bundles of blankets stacked on the shelves. Across the room, she lifted one of the saddles from the wall. Above it hung a bridle and bit, which Nancy also took down, and then picked up a saddle blanket. Turning back, she was surprised to see the door was closed. Nancy hurried over, put on her gear on the ground, and tried the door. It was locked. She remembered having seen a padlock hanging in the hasp outside. Had someone locked her in by mistake? Nancy pounded on the door and shouted, but no one came. Suddenly she realized that under the guard system, no one would be within hearing distance of her voice. Grimly, Nancy wondered if Dave had locked her in. Had he guessed her plan and done it to foil her? "I must get out of here," Nancy thought desperately. She played her flashlight around the long room and saw one window high in the wall. "I can squeeze through if I can find a way to reach it." At the end of one room, Nancy placed a pile of blankets under the pillow. Then she stacked saddles on top until she was sure it was standing in the window. Nancy climbed the unsteady pile and tried to push up the sash. The window was locked. She found the catch and managed to turn it. Once again, she tried to open the window, but it was stuck tight. Disappointed, she made her way down the floor. "Maybe I can find a pole and force the window up," she thought. Her flashlight revealed an iron crowbar in one corner. She dragged it back and forth between the window, climbed up again, and tried to force the sash open. As she struggled with it, she could see the kitchen at the end of one house and the spring house. Suddenly the window budged, and at the same moment, Nancy saw a gleam of light through a crack in the spring house wall. With a grasp of surprise, she let the crowbar fall, climbed out the window, hung over for a moment from the sill, and then dropped several feet to the ground. As she hit the earth, there was a sharp yelp to her left, and she ran towards her, barking loudly. "Hush," Nancy said. She patted the dog and tried to quiet him. "Stay here," she ordered. And then she sat down obediently while Nancy ran toward the spring house. While she was halfway there, the light went out. As she reached the door, Mr. Raleigh came running around the kitchen and the house. "What is it, Nancy? What's the matter?" he asked. Quickly, she told him what she had seen. "No one came out," she concluded. "Then whoever had the light on there must be still inside," he declared, and pulled open the heavy wooden door. Nancy shone her flashlight inside. The spring house was empty. And that's the end of that chapter.